Okay, you want to pull your presentation up? Yep, there it is.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. So are we ready to begin?
I'm waiting for Luke to see if there he is. Okay, so yeah, we could go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, and welcome to the Office of Economic Development Business Information Session. My name is Margaret McGee, and I'm the Business Services Manager. Business services assist entrepreneurs and business owners in starting and growing their business. We help in navigating through the different departments within city government to obtain permits and licenses. We also connect the business community with organizations that can provide technical assistance, incentives, resources, and other programs beneficial in operating a business. One way we do this is to host business information sessions. These sessions are held throughout the year, and the topics are gathered from entrepreneurs, surveys, and information we collect from the business community. This is a series of 3 sessions. This is the second session today, and we're focusing on tax preparation. Today we have Ms. Romy Samuel. She's the Collector of Revenue with the City of New Orleans Bureau of Revenue. We also have Mr. Luke Morris with the Louisiana Department of Revenue. And they both will share their expertise on business registration, occupational license renewal, and filing tax forms. I ask that you place all questions in a chat box, and we'll get to them in a Q&A section. To keep down distractions, can all attendees please turn off your videos and mute your speakers? The handouts that shared today will be shared with all attendees within 24 to 48 hours after the meeting has ended. This meeting is being recorded, and it'll be on a YouTube channel within a week to 2 weeks. Now I'll go ahead and turn it over to Ms. Romy Samuel, followed by Mr. Luke Morris.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Can everyone see the slide? It says City of New Orleans Department of Finance. Can you see that, Margaret?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. As Margaret mentioned, I am the Collector of Revenue over the Sales Tax and Occupational License Division. I'll give you a bit of information that certainly if you have questions at the end, we'll be happy to respond to those. I'll get started. All right, so the agenda today is the introduction, the intake of application, a few forms, and important information, summary information that you can use. This is to clarify the services that the Bureau of Revenue for the City of New Orleans offer. We administer and enforce ordinances regarding collection of sales tax and different types of sales tax, including hotel, motel, parking, French Quarter Economic Development Tax, Magnolia District Tax. Those are to name a few. But we also administer and enforce occupational licenses. Businesses who would like to operate within the parish limits of Orleans are required to have an occupational license. The Bureau of Revenue for the city also issues Mardi Gras permits, food truck permits, artist permits, and things of the like. We also issue resale certificates. Businesses who purchase items for resale can get a resale certificate with the City of New Orleans Bureau of Revenue so that you are not paying taxes to your suppliers because these items that are purchased are solely for resale in the course of your business. The intake and renewal process. New businesses are required to start with the Department of Safety and Permits of the City of New Orleans, and they have a specific department or unit that handles new business applications. and that is called the One Stop. They prefer that most, if not all, applications are done online, and that is the way they will communicate with you, through email. But the department is located on the 7th floor. Well, they recently moved to the Amico building. They used to be housed in City Hall's building, but they did make a move to the Amico building, which is located directly across the street from City Hall. Business owners have the option, once an application is approved, they do have the option to pay through the One Stop app, or can pay directly to the Bureau of Revenue. If you are paying online, the temporary is generated and you can print that for your records. Or if you come into the Bureau of Revenue, we will do the same. You can pay us directly. We will print out a temporary permit, which is good for 60 days. And then we'd ask you to amend the occupational license. That means an occupational license is actually due for a calendar, is good for a calendar year. And it's based on annual gross receipts from the previous year. That's how we do the calculation. So what happens is, when you begin in the middle of the year, we kind of project out your sales through the end of the year and make sure that you've paid the appropriate amount for your occupational license. Okay. One thing to note is, One Stop in the Department of Safety and Permits is for original intake of applications only. Any renewal or changes that need to be made to that occupational license will go through the Bureau of Revenue from that point forward. That is the handoff. Once the application is approved, the occupational license and the sales tax all live with the Bureau of Revenue. Okay. We do have businesses who are outside of Orleans Parish and not required to have an occupational license, but they sell into the parish, which means they deliver merchandise, furniture, food, whatever the item is, they deliver into Orleans Parish. They would be required to complete a Schedule A for a sales tax registration. And I'll show you that form next. Okay, this is the Schedule A document that we basically collect information from your business operation in order to issue you a certificate of registration, which is your sales tax account number. This sales tax number is where you would file your monthly sales tax returns. This schedule, the front of this schedule, is basically for the business information. We're just gathering the type of business you're operating and everyone who's involved with the business, okay? So the next, it's a 4-part application, and every line does not have to be completed. This is a general application. Only the specific details for registration need to be completed. Pages 2 and 3 here collect information on the owners or the principals of the business, and general banking information here. The last page is the signature page. Because it's a general application, some applications are required to have a notary to sign. In this case, for a sales tax registration, it's not required to be notarized. Okay, I'm going to show you a few tax forms that you'll probably need to be familiar with in your course of business. The renewal, occupational renewal, once you've gotten approved, you got your temporary license, you get a permanent license that lasts through December 31st. At the beginning of the year, you're required to renew the occupational license. We give you a grace period between January 1st through February, the end of February, the 28th or the 29th, before you're charged any penalty. What happens is, because you have to close out your prior year, we have to give you time to do so. So we do not charge penalty until March 1st of the renewal year, okay? Occupational licenses are calculated based on the gross from the prior year and can range from $50 up to $6,200 annually, depending on the type of businesses. Nonprofit organizations are required to have occupational licenses, but there is no charge. The fee is $0 for nonprofits, okay? This is a general sales and use tax form. It's Form 8071, and it's used for all retail sales. Sales taxes are due by the 20th of the month following when the sales were made, which means if your sales for January are due by February the 20th, that gives you time to close out the prior month and prepare all your returns for filing in the next month. Hotel motel, this is a sales tax, but it's for traditional hotels. So hotels are required to report on gross rentals, and they also are required to pay a hotel privilege tax. Hotels can also have restaurants, bars, things like that. That would be reported on the Form 8070, that general sales tax form that you saw in the prior slide, okay? Short-term rental forms is similar to the hotel motel tax form because they're renting out rooms as hotels do, but the difference with short-term rentals, there are additional fees. The residential or commercial occupancy fees are required here for short-term rentals. You do have the ability, the city does offer 3 websites currently for you to file online if you so choose. We have the NOLA.gov, which is called the eGov. That's the city's own website where you can file. There's a state-sponsored site, the Parish eFile website, and then there's another Sales Tax Online, which is a private company that offers the same service. We do accept payment and returns, sales tax return filings by mail, and walk-in taxpayers are always welcome in the Bureau of Revenue. This is a special event registration form. If you are a vendor, a special event vendor that will participate in festivals around the city, we do require you to get the occupational license as well as pay sales taxes by the conclusion of the event. The only requirement is that you have to have approval from the promoter in order to register and obtain your occupational license for that event. The good thing is that the special event occupational license is good for the calendar year. So you only need to get 1 license, but you can participate in as many festivals as you're interested in participating in, okay? A few important things to remember. The due date for the occupational license is between January 1st and the end of February. Occupational licenses expire December 31st of each year, but we will not charge penalty if you come in before March 1st. The sales tax due dates are the 20th of the month following the month where you made the sales. As in our example, January sales are not due to be reported until February 20th. All businesses are required to be registered and approved by One Stop in the Department of Safety and Permits before beginning a business. That is a requirement. You can be subject to penalties if you operate without the license. So we really would like you to be in compliance. Certainly, if you have any questions, we'd be happy to walk you through those. One Stop is for original application intake only. All renewals will be handled by the Bureau of Revenue after you've obtained your approval by One Stop. And all accounts must be approved by One Stop in order to receive sales tax clearances, your permanent occupational licenses, or resale certificates from Revenue. Sales tax clearances are for businesses who are selling alcohol, and in order to renew or even apply, you will need to be in compliance with those things before that can be issued. I would offer the city's website, NOLA.gov, and you can look up the Bureau of Revenue for permits and licenses to get this information as well. Thank you, and that concludes my presentation.
Thank you so much, Romy. Now we'll turn it over to Mr. Morris.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I think my my presentation should be on your screen.
Yes, I can see it.
Very good, thank you. My name is Luke Morris. I am the Deputy Secretary for the Louisiana Department of Revenue. We do some things like our friends at the New Orleans Bureau of Revenue in terms of collecting sales taxes, but we also do a few other tax types. So I'm going to highlight a few of those, what our major tax types are that you'll see related to businesses, as well as how we handle filing. There is some overlap with what you just heard, but I'm going to focus in more on our some of our other business taxes that you will encounter. But like I said, my name is Luke Morris, and we appreciate being part of this of these virtual business information sessions. It's always kind of the theme you'll see from these slides is that we do our best on the front end to educate taxpayers and businesses with the hope that we are not we don't see each other on the other side of the spectrum when it comes to collections and litigation and the like. So I'm going to cover, I'm going to give you just kind of an overview of the department, how we're structured, how we're set up, and then we're going to talk about those business taxes. And the most important slide will be the very last one, where I'm going to give you some hopefully good advice in navigating our tax system here in Louisiana. So starting off first, the Department of Revenue, we always like to share what our vision and our mission and goals are. And I'm not going to read it to you. It's on the screen, and there's copies, of course, that'll be circulated. But we are charged with collecting the majority of revenue that funds state government. So whereas Ms. Samuel is collecting revenue that is for the use by parish government, we have the entire state border to border. So we collect a little over $12 billion a year, which makes up about 75–80% of the state's general fund, with the difference coming from federal dollars as well as some of the other agencies. But our goal is certainly primarily to collect those dollars to fund the operations of government. But in doing so, we try our best to maintain the most efficient approach in doing so. And I'm going to cover how we highlight some of the efficiencies, such as online filing, in a few. But we are an agency of about 600 folks. We are structured primarily, the majority of our employees are in the tax collection program, which you see is one of the 4 entities within the Department of Revenue. We also have ATC, which is actually in the, we have a New Orleans office in Benson Tower, where we have LDR folks as well as ATC folks. We have the Office of Debt Recovery, which collects other agencies, both state and local final debts. We use our tax collection abilities to recover these funds that are due to other entities across the state. And we also regulate charitable gaming whenever there's a nonprofit entity that is benefiting from a raffle or some other form of gaming. So specific to the tax collection program, our agency is subject to the executive oversight by the Secretary of Revenue, who is Kevin Richard. He's actually just in the office right next to me right now. The Secretary is a gubernatorially appointed cabinet member, subject to Senate confirmation. So we do work in the executive branch, and we are accountable to the governor as our appointing authority. From there, we have the Deputy Secretary, which is myself, and then we have the remainder of our tax collection program is broken into different offices, and we have several divisions within each office. But those, the Office of Legal Affairs, Management and Finance, and the 3 tax groups make up the operations of the department as a whole. One thing we like to, as part of, I guess, the educational aspect of where we come from as serving as a tax collecting authority, is we like to present kind of a flow of how the process works from our perspective. And in doing so, what is our obligations? What's our responsibilities? How we accomplish that, of course, and then where does the taxpayer fall into that? So, and by taxpayer, we mean individuals that pay income tax, businesses that have to collect and remit sales tax, but we'll get to that part in just a moment. So primarily on the front end, we are dealing with legislation. So our legislature just ended its final regular session of this term a few weeks ago, and there are several different pieces of tax legislation that did pass that our policy services division will implement. And in this heading, taxpayers, of course, are constituents of the elected legislature, so they get to participate in the legislative process, which is always a good time. From there, let's say that legislation is passed, it's going to be our policy services and our public affairs divisions that are going to create the tax forms, as well as the instructions, and to issue guidance to help taxpayers understand what the law is in a generally like in an FAQ format, or a way to present technical tax information as hopefully as efficient as possible. But from there, we work to assist and educate taxpayers. We have a customer service center with folks that answer the phone calls all during the day, as well as a tax education division that you'll see in a moment works to do outreach, as well as for taxpayers, as well as practitioners like CPAs and enrolled agents and accountants. From that point, we move into where we are actually receiving tax returns that are filed, or receiving checks or online payments. And from there, we work to complete whatever the tax return is, to make sure that that revenue from that return makes its way into the state general fund, or one of the many dedications across state government. So this is section 1 of the compliance continuum, and this is where we strive to make the most of administering our tax system. We want all taxpayers to fall into this, because when we move to the right of the compliance continuum, this is not voluntary collections where taxpayers are voluntarily filing a return, voluntarily making the payments. This is the more expensive process, where we have to issue bills, we have to issue notices, we have to collect on those notices. And of course, that takes us all the way into the audit spectrum, and then litigation, and at times criminal enforcement, when we find that there has been a very severe violation of our tax laws. But we certainly don't want anyone on this call, or as few taxpayers as possible, to be anywhere on the spectrum. Section 1 of this continuum is where you want to be, where you are able to comply with the tax law. The department is able to receive those tax revenues, and we avoid some of the more difficult parts of the administration process. But I will say about 90 to 95%, give or take, of taxpayers fall in this section of the continuum. So that's where we strive for them to be, because it does lend itself to those efficiencies and contributing to the state government tax system. So from there, kind of understanding how we are structured and how we are divided up division wise, let's jump into some of the business taxes. Before we get to taxes, just so I'm not going to go through this in detail, but a business's taxes are going to depend on what kind of business that is, but primarily for income tax. Sales tax is going to apply to any of these regardless, but let's say income tax, there's certain some entities like corporations pay tax at the corporate level, whereas if you're a single owner of an LLC, you don't have to file that corporate return. You'll actually just file a supplementary schedule to your income tax return. So this is kind of just a comparison chart of those different entities and how the taxes are applied, how it is reported, and so on. So when it comes to as a taxpayer, as a business, when it comes time to remit those taxes, we strongly encourage that when the business is set up through the Secretary of State, if it's an LLC and it's being organized and created and the members are being named, at that process, when the business visits the Secretary of State's website, which is gobiz.com, they'll be able to register their business to do business in Louisiana with the Secretary of State. And as part of that process, they can register with the Department of Revenue, our Workforce Commission, and so forth to address the taxes that are going to be due eventually once that business is up and running. From there, and this is just an image from the GoBiz website. It's a very intuitive website that takes you step by step in creating that business. I know there's it discusses occupational taxes as like a reminder. You have to pay this to folks like Miss Samuel on the payer side. We don't collect occupancy taxes, but it does have this business license checklist to be able to put you in the right direction of moving forward with the creation of the business and then with the remittance of taxes when those times come. We strongly at the Department of Revenue recommend our Louisiana Taxpayer Access Point website. Whether it is a business that is manufacturing some type of property, or they are renting equipment, or they are selling items at a retail establishment, every piece of what will go into operating that business can be administered through this website when it comes to state taxes. So we have options for individuals, the registration process, you can remit taxes through this, you can obtain tax clearances. So this is what we strongly recommend that any new business sets up. And as part of going through the Secretary of State's process to create the business, you will be taken to this portal where you are able to set up your business profile. But when it comes to registering the business, I'm not going to play it for you right now, but there's an 11-minute YouTube that takes you step by step of registering for the account. What is the process? As you can see from this screenshot, as you go through the pieces of the registration portal, this video is going to give little pop-ups of to dive in a little bit more into details of what is required of each step. We also have a few other YouTube videos that discuss more of specific types of issues like special events, if it's a fair or a festival, the collection process, and so on. So we have a wealth of information on YouTube that is linked from our website. So when it comes to business taxes, the three primary taxes that you will see is going to be an income tax, a sales tax, and a withholding tax. Income tax is a percentage that is set by our legislature in state statute. It is a percentage of the income that you earned. Sales and withholding taxes, on the other hand, are not taxes that are incurred by the business, but they are what we call trust taxes. The business serves as an agent of the state in collecting tax on those retail sales where sales tax is due. So let's say the business is a convenience store that is selling convenience store products to consumers. The business will be responsible for collecting the sales tax on those sales and then remitting it to the government. But it's actually the consumers who bear the tax at the end of the day. They're having to pay that tax at the time of purchase. The business is going to hold on to that at a month at a time and then send it to its respective government collectors. The corporate income tax, we do have this tax on our book. I will tell you, it's a smaller tax when it's in relation to the number of taxpayers. But those taxpayers who are corporations do remit a large amount of the overall revenue that's collected. We processed about 131,000 corporate income tax returns last year, as compared to almost 2 million individual income tax returns. So not very many corporations exist due to there's other types of entities such as the LLC that have simpler filing requirements, simpler tax remittance requirements, and so forth. But we do have a 3-rate system for corporate income taxes, as well as a franchise tax that is still on our books. It doesn't kick in until there is more than $300,000 of capital that is being used in the state, but this is more specific to think a large plant or a very large retailer. When those retailers or those plants or whatever it may be is in the Louisiana market, they are benefiting from the ability to exist here and derive benefits from the states, then there is this special level of franchise tax that applies. But again, it's very rare that a smaller business is going to be organized as a corporation. That is likely going to be an LLC, which does not actually have a filing requirement with the Department of Revenue. Those LLCs are reported as part of the federal return, and they make their way to the individual income tax return. But for LLCs, generally no separate income tax filing is required. What is absolutely required is going to be the sales and use tax return. And our return looks fairly similar to Ms. Samuel's return for Orleans Parish. It is just line by line, where the seller / business / dealer is reporting how much did you sell in the previous month, how much of tax is due on that, and then how much is being remitted at the end of the day. When it comes to sales taxes, the general rule is that everything's taxable unless it's not, which probably doesn't make for a good rule in terms of there are several exemptions and exclusions in our state law that apply. So the largest one on the books right now is actually in the Constitution, and it says that food that is purchased for home consumption, so basically groceries that are purchased, are not subject to the state's 4.45 sales tax. We also exempt pharmaceutical prescriptions and the like, as well as utilities that are used for residential homes. But we have a helpful guide on our website that breaks down all of the different types of exemptions that are out there. So the ones I just mentioned, you see they have a 0 rate. Whereas when you get to some of these other exemptions, they may apply at a lesser rate, or they may be fully taxable. So, and you can see from this column approach that the legislature from time to time will change these. But as part of being a business and collecting sales tax, it is that business that is going to be responsible for collecting the right amount and relying on the guidance that the department publishes. But similar to Orleans Parish, as well as the other parishes, our sales taxes, what the business collects during a given month is remitted by the 20th of the following month, inclusive of filing the tax return, so that the department is able to track how much revenue is being collected from what types of businesses, so that we can provide that information to our legislature, who are the policymakers in arriving at what the tax policy of this state is. This question usually comes up a lot, and this is the same regardless if it is the state or the parish sales taxes. Only a few types of services in Louisiana are taxable. Probably the biggest one is going to be hotel rooms. The service of providing a hotel room to the public is a taxable service. Also, Parking vehicles, that's another large one. Repairs of tangible personal property. So think your vehicle or your lawnmower, if you have to take that to be repaired. Whatever parts are being purchased are subject to sales tax, and whatever the automotive shop is charging for repairs is also subject to sales tax. But this is an exhaustive list. So if there is a type of service, let's say consulting or a law firm, if that service that's being provided is not on this list, then it is not taxable. So we don't generally receive sales tax returns from a law firm, but there is a use tax that does apply when there isn't sales tax paid. So, but in most situations, a service is not going to be taxable. But again, these major exceptions do apply. And then the last of our major taxes is withholding taxes. So similar to sales tax, where the business has to collect that sales tax on each sale and remit it to government, withholding tax follows a similar approach, except instead of collecting tax from the consumers that are purchasing items, the withholding tax is for employees. So if you are a company that has a staff of 10 employees, you're required to withhold a certain amount of tax from their paychecks, their salaries, and remit that to the Department of Revenue. And then at the end of the year, that employee, that individual is going to receive their W-2, and they will file their tax return, and they'll report how much was withheld by their employer throughout the year, and that will be applied against whatever their tax liability is. One big exception to withholding tax is if you are a single member LLC. Let's say I create a consulting firm and it is just me. Except in a few specific situations, if I would not pay myself a salary, I would not be required to withhold tax from that. It is if the business makes $10,000 in a given month, that $10,000 is with the business, but it's not going to be considered wage income. It's going to be the profits of the business that are taxable directly to me as a single member individual LLC. But withholding, it is in certain cases, it could be on a monthly payment requirement, but generally it is going to be a quarterly period. So from January to March is one period and so on. And those taxes are remitted. Again, they can be remitted through the TAP in addition to their sales taxes when they come due on a monthly basis. We also administer several other taxes. I'm not going to dive into each of those, but on our website, we have a good bit of information on each and every tax presented as FAQs and the like. I was going to mention, because you folks are in the Orleans Parish area, we do have the food and beverage tax, the hotel occupancy tax, and the stadium and exhibition district tax. Those are not state level taxes. Well, they're not, they are taxes that are dedicated back to these different entities in the parish. So we do, on behalf of Orleans Parish, as well as limited other parishes, we do collect additional taxes, as well as some fees, but that's more of the exception than the general rule. On the excise tax side, that's going to be the liquor taxes, our tobacco taxes. Most of those other ones apply to oil and gas companies, but if it's a convenience store / gas station and they're selling cigarettes and vape and alcohol, they're going to be required to file a return for those particular taxes and to remit those. Whereas a sales tax is the business is collecting the tax at the point of sale and then remitting it to the government. An excise tax is not the same. It is, because of these types of products and what they are, this tax applies for the business to have the ability to sell that. And as you can see, most of these are they're generally referred to as sin taxes because it's a particular activity that the government has said there's going to be a special tax to apply. Generally, they are dedicated, such as the tobacco tax. A good portion of that is dedicated back to different entities that research tobacco usage and try to eliminate it. So, but yes, those are separate taxes. But again, you can open an account for each tax type all through a single login via the tab. That's some more information on some excise taxes. But again, if you're not selling these particular products to the public, then these would not apply to you. But if you do, it is very important that these excise taxes are remitted. We do provide a number of clearances. Again, on that LATAP website, you can obtain a clearance, letters of good standing, just to say that your account is clear and there's no issues. We issue alcohol clearances, gaming clearances, as well as if a business wants to contract with state government, we will issue a clearance as part of that process to make sure that they are in good standing with the department. I think as far as online filing options, like I said, LATAP is a major one. We have an e-file program where businesses and taxpayers can e-file, or more commonly, their practitioners will e-file their returns. And then we also are part of the parish e-file system. Ms. Samuel did mention that one. It is through its functionality, you can file the state return, the state sales tax return, and one or more local sales tax returns, and I believe make a single payment as part of that process. So that is another option that is available for sales tax compliance. And then probably the most important slide here. This is, I've been at the department for 8 years now, and these are the 4 major things that I always recommend to a CPA, a practitioner, or just any taxpayer in general. And going back to the compliance continuum, to stay on that section 1 of it, where we hope everyone remains, is whichever tax returns a business is required to file, we really, it's very important to file those returns on time, as well as if there's a tax due and not a refund, either the tax needs to be paid on or before the due date, or we strongly recommend entering into a payment plan. We, of course, like the parishes, have a number of collection tools. We would prefer not to have to use a single one, and everyone remitted their taxes voluntarily, but that is not always the case. So we do have to, at times, we will levy a bank account, or we will suspend a driver's license, or other options to make sure that the folks that don't pay their taxes, like the majority of the other taxpayers, that we are able to collect from that and maintain and administer the tax system as a whole. But again, it's all businesses are going to have to pay a tax on their income. It's just at what level do they pay it? Is it at a corporation level, or does it flow through to the individual level? And then depending on what the business is doing will determine whether it has sales taxes, or if it has employees and it needs to collect and remit withholding tax, or if it's selling alcohol, it needs to have an excise tax return. The second major thing, and this is probably somehow the most important, but it is imperative that you as a business maintain your address on file with LDR. That the law specifically requires that of businesses, but I have seen situations where and more so an individual, but this individual moves, and once or twice in the year, the address they used on their tax return is 1 or 2 addresses ago. And if the department sends notices, if we send that notice to the address of record, then that can be that the collections, the due process that's afforded to every taxpayer still applies against the taxpayer if they did not update their address. So I encourage through LATAP, of course, you can update it. And we also have a part of our website that you can update it there as well. Third most important item is to retain the documentation the law requires. So we recommend 7 years. Generally, the period of audit is 3 years, but in some situations, let's say sales tax, if you collect that sales tax at the point of sale, but you don't remit it to the government, that 3-year period becomes 10. So no one should ever do that because that is technically theft from the government, and that puts us more in that criminal investigation side of that. So we certainly recommend remitting those taxes on time, but as well as maintaining the documentation that's required based on the particular tax, whether that's keeping invoices or the list of employees and their salaries and how much is withheld. It just depends on which tax type we're looking at the moment, but documentation is a very important thing. And then last, if a taxpayer chooses to hire a tax preparer, we recommend that they do their research on that preparer and they hire a competent one. I can tell you an unfortunate number of stories of tax preparers who hold themselves out to be able to get you the largest refund, and they will get you the largest refund, but it in some cases is not the correct refund. And even though you have a tax preparer that prepared the taxes, if there is a balance that is found to be due, the department and any other tax collecting body will be required to go to the taxpayer, not the tax preparer. So that very large refund an individual may receive would in the long term have to be paid back with interest and penalty. We have a very active criminal investigations division that does try to identify these unscrupulous tax preparers, and we issue cease and desist notices. We send folks in undercover, just a number of things to try to eliminate that, because these folks take advantage of taxpayers that may be truly relying on them, and then at the end of the day, it's going to come back and become a liability for them to satisfy. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions. I would just ask you to keep in mind those best practices and to also visit the Department of Revenue's website. We have FAQs on every single tax type. We have a very long form section where you can see every tax return as well as every instruction set to that return. And then of course the LATAP information, the link to LATAP parachute file, as well as different types of guidance we post. For example, if there's a storm that impacts the state and we extend tax deadlines administratively, that kind of information is posted online. So with that, I think that concludes my presentation, but again, happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Romy, and thanks, Luke, for those great presentations. As you guys can see, there's a lot of similarities and a few differences. Either way, I really and truly hope this information will help everyone with their business registrations, renewals, and filings. So now we have a few questions in the chat. Can you see it, Luke?
Yes, I can. Let's see. So I think the first question for me is, what is the process for changing your business address? That can be done through LATAP. And then if you go to, and I'm gonna actually, you know what, I'm gonna reshare my screen so I can just point you directly to it. This is the Department of Revenue's website. This is the home page here, and if you need to update your address, right here on the very first home page, we have an option to update your address if you're an individual, as well as on the business side, the registration and change of address. But like I said, as a business, we have the LATAP login section right here and all of the functionality for that. As well as resale certificates, we do issue those as well. And then like I said, on the form side, businesses, you can see all of our different withholding returns, our sales tax return, and so forth.
Okay, now, and if Romy can also answer that question?
Sure. It's a bit more involved for the city because there are zoning requirements for the businesses. And if you are, it depends on what type of business you want to operate at a particular address. It has to be approved for that use. So you would have to go through safety and permits, the Department of Safety and Permits, just like you were going through for the initial application. But what you're doing is requesting an address change as an existing business. So they'll still have to possibly come out and do an inspection of the location to make sure it's a permitted use. Once that is approved, you will have to turn in your current occupational license, and the Bureau of Revenue will reissue the updated license with the new address. Okay.
Okay. So Ms. Renetta, actually asked about the renewal. I think you're working on that now.
That's correct.
And the next one we have is, will these slides be emailed? Yes, I will email the slides to you within 24 to 48 business hours. Next question. Do you have to submit quarterly tax payments if you are a single member LLC, taxed as a disregarded entity?
So the short answer is yes, but it's not, the quarterly tax payments are not going to necessarily be in the name of the LLC. Those quarterly payments would be coming from the owner of the LLC because it's a disregarded single member LLC. But if an individual, again, that owns a business does not remit quarterly on time, there is a penalty that applies at the federal and state level. But in your specific situation as a new business, there are a number of exceptions to that penalty. If the amount of income increased by a certain amount, or if you paid as much as you paid in the prior year, there's several exceptions that will apply, and that penalty would not be added to your tax amount due. But that is the concept of that is that, like say myself as an employee, I'm having withholding done every single time I get paid. The business as a small business or a proprietorship is required to estimate that. But again, if you can generally obtain an exception if in the case of being a new business.
Okay, I think the next question is from Ms. Rebecca. I think I would have her unmute herself and ask that question.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. We are working to start a business, and I was wondering if there's starting to get permits, and wondering if there's any place that we can look and see a list of taxes that we would need to charge, other than sales tax. It is, for more context, it is a hospitality business, so it's a motel. So I know that there's some different tourism assessments and those kind of things. Is there a master list of where I could find that information to make sure that we're charging the correct amount?
For the LDR side, yes, that information is available on our website. I don't know at the moment where it is to point you to it, but I'm going to make a note, and I will send a link to that to Ms. McGee to include with the email with the slides. But I'll send you what we have at the state level.
Great, thank you so much.
For the city, we do have on the return itself, it does, we don't charge any additional assessments. So the breakdown of the sales tax rates are on the actual return. There is a sales tax rate lookup and I'll provide that to Margaret to send out to the group, where you can type an address and it'll tell you the rates that are due. Because we do have economic development districts in Orleans Parish that may levy an additional tax. So
Mhm.
I'll send that link to Margaret to publish.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
So are there any more questions? Now's the time to ask. You have two very professionals on here to answer those questions for you.
Margaret, and sometimes, if after the presentation, people will come up with questions. If that happens, just have them to email you and send them to us, because in the middle of the presentation, if you can't really think about what you want to ask, but
Mhm.
we're open to respond after the session.
Sounds good.
I did have another, this is Rebecca again. I did have another question. I don't necessarily want to monopolize everybody's time. So if there's anybody else on the chat that has a question, I can.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so one of the other pieces of business that we help manage are some short-term rentals and bed and breakfasts. Have a couple questions from our owners on how to remit taxes. One of the channels, Airbnb, remits taxes on the owner's behalf, is our understanding. And so how would I go about filling out that? I believe it's the 80-10 form for the STRs. For the gross revenue, would that be all gross revenue outside of Airbnb? Is that how I
Yes.
would?
So actually, if you are an STR, I'm gonna just give you a general overview.
Mhm.
If you're an STR who operates solely on the platforms,
Mm-hmm.
meaning, Airbnb, HomeAway, any of the platforms, we have a collection agreement with those platforms to collect and remit the tax on your behalf. That means if you're solely operating on the platform, you will not have to register with the city of New Orleans for sales tax purposes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but if you operate on both, outside of the platform, both on and off, you are required to get that sales tax registration. And to your question, on the STR form,
Mm-hmm.
there is a line that you report all gross, including the Airbnb gross, but then you take a deduction for any sales reported on the platform. Okay. And then you'll have an adjusted gross, which is, all the sales that you made outside of the platform that you'll report on.
Okay, great. And is that agreement with more than just Airbnb? So VRBO is another big platform that we get. Marriott Homes and Villas. If
You can ask. They should be able to provide that information to you if there is a collection agreement with the city of New Orleans. But I think in order to, I know as the owner, you have to have your short-term rental permit from the Department of Safety and Permits. And I think those platforms should require you to show that permit information, and they can give you whether or not they're collecting on your behalf. Now, if they do not have a collection agreement, you are responsible for those taxes. So, just make sure that there is an agreement in place before you progress to participate with those platforms. Otherwise, you'll be certainly assessed and penalized if those taxes aren't paid.
Absolutely. All right, thank you so much. Yeah, we're just getting started onto those platforms, so it's good. We wanted to kind of get ahead of it.
Okay.
So appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Okay, no more questions? Okay, so if there's no more questions, I would like to thank everyone for joining us today, especially our guest speakers for their awesome presentations. Within 5 to 10 business days, this session will be available on the Office of Economic Development YouTube channel, along with previous recorded sessions. Our next session is Tuesday, June the 27th, and our speaker is a representative from the Internal Revenue Service. Remember to check your emails for reminders, and I hope everyone will join us and have a great day. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you. Appreciate you.